So coming back with Yang on the NA version of the game is MHXX, and you guys know that I am a huge Saber-face simp, so I absolutely am going to make a video shilling for this servant, and I mean, it's also for good reason. MHXX is one of like the most damaging servants in the game given the right setup and fighting the right opponent. And you know what? Sometimes you really just want to smack a big boss with huge fat damage numbers. So we're going to talk about her in today's video. But before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content. And if you're like, man, I wish I could see this ZTO guy do even more stuff, well, not only do I have other channels linked down in the description down below covering things like Bleach and Yu-Gi-Oh, but I also have my Twitch down there as well, where every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to be playing FGO. So, you know, you could come out and watch your boy farm, or just get obliterated by some new challenge quests. So, with all that being said, let's start out by talking about MHXX's hits. And she's got some pretty decent hits. Nothing super insane here, but they did give her a double arts and double buster deck to allow her to do some decent buster crits, although she is lacking in any crit damage, spoiler alert, but hey, I guess they gave that to her, so you know, if you get some stars on those buster cards, she can do a big buster crit, I suppose. Would have rather her had the additional quick card instead, because her star gen's actually not that bad at 15%. The hits on the quick card are actually really good at 4, and she has a passive 10% quick buff that's also going to buff how good her quick cards are, so I kind of wish she had 2 of those. But it's okay, she's also got like the 4 in her passive to help her get those 2 stars every turn, and she does have a skill that does allow her to get immediate stars as well. Also not entirely accurate to say that she doesn't have like a crit buff for these stars, right, because technically she does have a 10% passive for those crits, but, you know, not really like an actual like normal crit skill to utilize, right? So, you know, kind of good and bad as there passively, but it's not like really all that substantial, but it gives a little bit of a bite to those crits. But most importantly, her being an art servant, you want to be looping her NP, and she's got some pretty decent arts cards. They're not super insane. She's got 2 of them with 3 hits apiece with 0.64% NP gain. That's pretty average, but because she is also like kind of a crit servant as well, if you're getting crits on those, it'll kind of shore up those average NP gain numbers and make her able to loop her NP that much easier. Overall, her hits are very solid. My only complaint is that she has the double buster instead of the double quick, but again, it's fine because it allows her to do buster crits, and that kind of shores up her damage whenever her NP and all of her other things are down. Because as we'll kind of notice as we go through all of MHXX's skills, pretty much everything she has is on a 1-turn cooldown, meaning that she's kind of the equivalent of a nuclear bomb, right? Like, you pop all of her skills and she will absolutely eviscerate whoever is in her path, but then you gotta wait for the skills to come back up. Thankfully, the cooldowns for those skills are actually quite low, and let's go ahead and just start diving into some of these skills. So starting off with skill 1, this is going to give her invincibility for 1 turn and give her a solid 50% attack buff for 1 turn as well on a 5-turn cooldown. The only annoying thing here, and you guys know I'm going to bring it up, that this is very similar to, say, like Jack, Raiko, or Jalter's skill, where they have their survivability tied to their damage steroid, so you might be in a conundrum sometimes wondering, do I want to pop the skill for the attack buff, or do I want to save it for later for the survivability? Thankfully, as an art servant, your 2 main guys that are really going to be supporting your servants and supporting MHXX is Castoria and Lady Avalon, and they are both exceptionally good at keeping your servants alive. Castoria has targeted invincibility, and she has the insanely broken solemn defense on her NP, whereas Avalon gives you pretty much HP refund with the max HP gimmick she has, and she has Merlin's AoE nope skill. Now, granted, Lady Avalon is still a ways out, but you still have Castoria right now. So, at least for MHXX, you can more comfortably go for this skill whenever you want the damage, because you know that, especially if you have double Castoria, that she's got your back. And even if you're doing like a waiver Castoria setup or a Tamamo Castoria setup, because you know, maybe you don't have your own Castoria, Waver does bring defense as well with his defensive skill and the ability to drain the enemy's NP, and Tamamo actually does give you a heal, which might not sound that big of a deal, but it's at least something paired with Castoria, right? The point being is that at least for art servants, it's not as big of a deal for them to face this conundrum as it would be like a buster servant, right? Because, you know, Tamamovich does not protect you at all, and Scotty, well, is not exactly the greatest at keeping people alive. So overall, just pop this skill whenever you want to do mad damage, because that 50% attack is going to make sure that your NP and any crits you do for that turn are just going to do mad damage. Moving on to her second skill, this is going to be a star bomb for her. She's going to drop 20 stars and then reduce her own crit star absorption for that turn as well. This is also on a very low 4-turn cooldown, so basically just say that like every 4 turns, she's just going to drop 20 stars for the entire party. And with her pretty decent natural star gen stat, if you happen to do like a Brave Chain before this with the quick card in it, you will have yourself pretty much enough stars to play around with for that turn. Reducing your own critical star absorption might be a little annoying for some people, but it's really like not that big of a deal because she does generate like a decent bit of stars, and if you can afford to throw like a 20-30 on one of your supports, you should have enough stars going around that it really doesn't matter. Although overall there's not a whole lot to actually talk about here because she really is just dropping 20 stars and maybe missing some stars here and there because, you know, maybe you only had those 20 for that turn and maybe she'll miss some. Finally, there's her third skill. You also want to pop this whenever you want to do some big boy damage because she's going to get Pierce Invincibility for a turn, a pretty decent 50% special damage mod against threats against humanity for a turn, and she's going to give herself a 30% battery. And this is all on a 5-turn cooldown. So yeah, not only is she doing big damage with the first skill, threats against humanity, the special damage mod is really good, especially because Castoria also gives you that special damage mod, and this is like all of the end bosses, right? Like all the Lost Belt trees and such. So like it's really good against some of the hardest fights in the game, like pretty much all of like the main enemies, right? And then also just making it easier for her to get to her NP. As long as you're like within range of like 70%, she can just charge her own NP back. It also gives her like somewhat of a farming niche, right? Because MHXX can do so much damage on her own. Let's say that you're like in some farming node where there's like a really big saber or a really big, I don't know why there'd be a really big threat against humanity on the second node, but maybe you got some guy there. With her append skill, she can functionally have a 50% battery, right? So if you want to use like an event CE that gives her starting 50% gauge, you don't have to worry about her at all. And again, she does so much damage that you really don't even have to worry about like buffing her at all. So it does give her like a little bit of a niche for that as well. Finally, we'll look at that NP because that kind of is the whole saber thing that I was just talking about. They recently buffed it. I have no earthly reason to know why they did this, but they were like, you know what, a 150% special damage mod against sabers, not good enough. Boom, we're gonna make it 200%. Now, they did restrict it to saber class servant enemies, right? So the example that I just gave earlier, it would have to be like some random like Artoria right over there, right? Which you might not think is all that common, but JP is introducing new free quests that are like really wild with like the 90++ nodes, and actually recently right now you should be able to use this on a node. It technically wouldn't work because there's 3 enemies, but there's like these new guys that are introduced in Trom that count as servants, and one of them is a saber. So if you have something like that, you could use her for farming. Again, not going to be all that common, but again, her damage, even aside from just having these special damage mods, is still really high. But yeah, for whatever reason, they were like, you know, we're going to restrict it to Saber class servants, but dude, 200% is absolutely ungodly. It is so much damage. And then they also just tossed her a 20% attack buff that scales up to 60% on her overcharge that procs first as well. Because you know what? Screw it. She needs to do more damage. And that's kind of the name of the game with MHXX. I mean, I literally called her a nuke, but that's exactly what she is. You just pop all of her skills and then just have her, like, obliterate somebody. Even with no special damage mod, she's going to hit them for a lot of damage. And God forbid she has special damage mods. Then you just give her a couple of turns to kind of get those things back up, and then she'll just keep nuking the enemy down. Which makes a pretty interesting dichotomy with her being on right up with Yang right now, because Yang is like a much more consistent servant. She does not have the same highs as MHXX, but she's a bit more consistent in a way. Like, her damage doesn't really fall off that hard. Like, all you gotta do is like get a burn off, which can happen by either the enemy attacking you or you hitting the enemy with the NP, and she lowers a lot of their defense, all that good stuff. But MHXX is like, do you need to nuke this boss, right? Especially like maybe your box isn't as good and you're struggling with like specific end bosses, right? Maybe there is some threat against humanity boss that is just stumping you in the story. MHXX can make quick work of them, quick, fast, and in a hurry. She can absolutely obliterate them, and that kind of gives her some nice appeal. That if there's just some boss or like some saber somewhere out there that is giving you trouble, MHXX will obliterate them, right? She will nuke them into the dirt. And even if you just want to use her as, you know, your DPS art servant, right? You need a single target art servant. She can be that person, because even without her damage mods, again, her damage is still very, very good. Although, again, I will say that make sure you keep in mind that Van Gogh is the next banner right after this, right? Like, we do know that she's going to be coming out very, very soon. And then if you also want someone like Ashiadomen, Ibuki, if you want to summon on Raiko coming back, or Muramasa at the end of the year, you know, all these banners are coming out. Make sure you kind of leverage, like, do you want this nuclear bomb that has a saber face attached to it, right? Or do you want to go for, like, the Shiro face, right? Just kind of weigh your options if you're more of a free-to-play player. But if you do decide to roll, I wish you good luck. Hopefully this video serves as a catalyst and you get some good luck. With all that being said, though, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.